So hi, my name is Abdul and I handle community relations at DotVVM. Welcome to the DotVVM Global Community Meetup. And this is the second meetup since starting of this year. And we have like amazing line of speakers this time as well. So I have like a few updates before we start the presentations from Thomas. All right, 1 second. All right, so agenda for today's meetup is basically welcome note by me, and then there will be Thomas talking about .vvm 3.0, and then the short presentation from Daniel, and then we will have like Q&A or like open mic session, whatever the community prefers. So uh, I'm happy to announce that we have released .vm 3.0. Like if you remember earlier in the previous meetup where we basically released the beta version, and now I'm happy to announce that we have released 3.0. So 3.0 as like as we promised, we have like a new features, small improvements, and then bug fixes as well. So I don't want to get into too deep into this because Thomas will be explaining you in detail on all of this. And so now the meat of the meetup. I don't want like most of you know Thomas doesn't need introduction. Just like a 1 or 2 line introduction for Thomas. So Thomas is author of .vvm, and Thomas is also CEO of Riganti. Riganti is basically a custom software solution company based out of Czech Republic. And Thomas is also like a very active in basically .NET Foundation and has been basically running the conferences related to .vvm in Czech Republic. And Thomas has been like a well-known speaker in Europe and all over the world. So without further ado, over to you, Thomas, and can't wait to hear about the new release of .vvm.
Okay, thanks. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay, can you see the screen? Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so I will be talking.
Yes.
I will show you. What's been added into .vvm 3.0. And the most important thing, because I was talking about .vvm 3.0 several times before. So if you saw the previous sessions, you will see some demos which you have already seen. But I will be also sharing some ideas and news we will have for the next releases. So basically, right now, in order to introduce .vvm is a framework which can be used to build new web apps with the model viewmodel approach, and also to modernize web forms applications and moving them to .NET Core or .NET 5. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, we have released .vvm 3.0, which was a very important release for us, about a year of work on the project. And we will be releasing .vvm 3.1 quite soon. It should be sometime next month, because there were a lot of features that we planned for 3.0, but they didn't make it to 3.0. There were still some issues or bugs, or we just need more time to review. So that's why we will be releasing them in the next month. Maybe there will be other releases like 3.2, 3.3. This is not decided yet, so we will see, because basically we want to deliver the features we develop as quickly as possible to the audience, to the users. So probably there will be 3.2 and other releases, but we have some plans for some larger features that might take some time. So we probably will be releasing .vvm 4.0 later this year. So to sum up news in .vvm 3.0, we have already released a hotfix 3.01, because there were some issues, some breaking changes we didn't want it to make, but we found out that we caused some troubles. So that's why we released a hotfix, and we will be publishing another hotfix this week. So if you are using just 3.0.0, just to make sure to upgrade as soon as possible, because these hotfixes are repairing some problems we introduced in this new version. And they should not cause any new problems. They should just fix the problems we already discovered. And most of these things addressed by these hotfixes is just some breaking changes we didn't intend it to do, but we happened to introduce in the new version. So every hotfix should help you to make the upgrade process to .vvm 3.0 easier and easier. That's the goal. And if you are interested in a complete list of what has been introduced in .vvm 3.0, you can go to GitHub and see the release notes. If you are on the homepage of our repo, there is the releases section. So if you open this release, you can read about all the features and improvements we have created, and you can see it's quite a lot of stuff. The first section is just new features. Then there is a lot of improvements and fixes and some breaking changes. If you are upgrading your application from 2-point-something to 3, make sure to go through this section, because there are some breaking changes. Most of them are not significant. If you haven't been writing your own JavaScripts, you will probably not meet many of those. But if you have been using the file upload component, then some methods have been made async. So that's a change you will probably meet, that if you have been using get file or return file, now you need to use get file async or return file async. But that's quite easy to discover, because the compiler will tell you that this method doesn't exist anymore. And if you look carefully in the IntelliSense, you will see the get file async and return file. So that's, for most .vvm users, this is the only breaking change they will probably meet. Okay, so the biggest feature introduced in .vvm 3.0 is a thing we call a JS directive or JS modules. And basically, it allows you to integrate JavaScript code with .vvm application. So you can interact with the view model, and you can call functions which are defined in .vvm from your JavaScript code. And also you can call JavaScript functions from .vvm pages. So basically it's a two-way interaction between some piece of JavaScript and between your .vvm user interface. So there's a lot of use cases for it. If you, for example, want to do changes in the view model on the client side in the browser, and you don't want to just send the view model to the server just to assign some trivial value, that's one use case. The other use case is if your application is consuming some kind of API, for example, GraphQL or anything like that. That's the thing you can do from JavaScript. And also, if you are using any kind of third-party components or libraries, that's where also this can be very useful. So basically, what you need to do is to add this add.js directive at the top of the page. And this is the name of the script you will register in .vvm startup. And it will add a JavaScript module. It will load this module when the page gets loaded in the browser. And you will be able to interact with this JavaScript file. And there are basically two mechanisms that you can do. The JavaScript file must export some function. You will see it later in the demo. And basically, you can call .vvm commands from JavaScript. So you can declare this dot named command component in the page. It's not visible. It doesn't render anything. It's just a command. Yeah, so you can call anything on the server, and it has a name. And you can then write JavaScript code, so you can call context.named commands and name of the command. This should be equal. And it's a function, so you can pass parameters to it, and it will call the command and return a promise, so you can watch if the action is already completed or if there is any kind of error or anything like that. So if you want to call something .vvm-ish from JavaScript, that's one way. And the second way is that you can call JavaScript functions from binding expressions. So for example, you can have a button in the page which will call some JavaScript function in the module, or you can, for example, use combo box, the drop-down list for selecting items, and you can say something selection changed equals, and this command that will call some JavaScript function. So this is very easy. To do. So let's look at the demo. I have upgraded the sample from the last time, so it looks a little bit different, but still it's my dashboard for tracking the pizza delivery couriers. So if I run the application, you can see there is the map, and there are some placeholders or some circles which represent the positions of the couriers. And if I zoom it in, you can see that they are moving quite slowly, because this page is using signal R. So it gets the new positions of the couriers from the server. And can you please mute yourself, because there's some noise from the background? Okay, so basically the server sends the updated positions of these couriers, and you can interact with the map. So when I click on the courier, it gets highlighted in red, and you can see also that this user interface on the right side, it changed. So when I select someone, I can send messages. Yeah, so there is the interaction. So when I click on something in the map, it will tell DotVVM, okay, hide this section and show another section. And also when I select something in this list, okay, you can see that the courier is also highlighted. So the communication works in both ways, because you never know which action the user will do first. So this is basically synchronized. So how you can do this? You can see that I have used the JS directive. So I have imported a thing called dashboard module in the page. And the dashboard module is this JavaScript file. And it's registered here in .vvm startup. So you can see there is, I'm registering a resource called dashboard module on this URL. And it depends on Google Maps and Signal R, because this JavaScript file needs Google Maps API and it needs Signal R, and these has to be loaded before this JavaScript gets loaded. So that's why it's in the dependencies, and the Google Maps and Signal R are registered here. So this just gets the JavaScript Google Maps API, and this just gets the Signal R library, which is here in the lib directory, right here, this one. So this will load this JavaScript module in the page. Oh, sorry, wrong Visual Studio. And this file needs to export a default function. And this function is basically called by .vvm whenever the module is needed. And this function is supposed to return an object which lives behind the page, and the page can interact with it. And if you just load another page which would be using the same module, this function would be called again, and you would get a new instance. You can request these modules also from markup controls. So if you will use two controls on the same page, this function would be called twice, because the module is scoped to the view file where this directive is used. Yeah, so this directive means that this will be called, and I'm creating a new app, which is my class, JavaScript class, and I'm passing the context parameter, which is very important because I will need this context parameter to be able to interact with .vvm. So here, this constructor is called once the page is loaded. And at that stage, the view model of the page is already prepared. So you can just write your code. You don't need to wait for anything or just to hook to any events. So I'm initializing a Google map. So I'm calling this function from Google Maps API. And I tell the map to live in an element with the ID equals map. So in the page, I have this div element, which will host the map. And I'm also initializing a SignalR connection. So I'm connecting to my SignalR hub, which is declared here, and it will just send me the new positions of the couriers. So when I get the information about new positions, I will be calling a function called onNewPositions. And also I can get some notifications when I get message from the chat. So also there is the onNotification function. And because once I'm initialized, I can update the view model of .vvm. So basically what I can do is there is a new API which is called a patch state, and you can just patch the .vvm view model with your changes. So you can just say, okay, set the connected property in the view model to true. Yeah. And I'm also initializing some jQuery plugin which can create notifications. Yeah, so this is executed when the page is loaded in the browser. And once I get the new positions from the server, I will just be moving the markers on the map. So this is not very .vvm stuff. It's just using the Google Maps API to just create markers and move them, setting positions when the position is changed. The only important thing from the .vvm perspective is this. So I'm adding a listener to the click event on the marker. And if I click the marker, I will be calling a function in .vvm. So I'm using this context, and I'm calling the select courier named command, and I'm passing the ID of the courier, which is some number. Yeah? And this is important because this needs a named command control in the page, which is declared here. So basically, this line of code calls my function defined here, and it can pass parameters. So you can see I have put lambda expressions here. So this parameter will get the number of the courier, and I'm just manipulating with the view model. So I'm setting something to the selected courier property. Yeah. So that's how I select the courier, and the user interface here is will be changed because there is a section with the list of couriers, and it's visible only if the selected courier is null. But once I set something in the selected courier, this section will disappear and this section will appear. So I will be able to send messages in the chat. Yeah, so that's basically, so I can call some JavaScript command and it can do changes in the view model. And also the other way of communication is here. So I have a link button in the list of couriers. And when I select a courier from the list, so basically when I click here on something, then I'm doing two things. I'm also assigning the selected courier. So the current courier from the list will be assigned to the selected courier in the root. And I'm calling _JS invoke, and I'm calling the highlight courier function. And this function is defined in my module. So you can go here, and here there is a function highlight courier, and I can just I will be looking for some marker with the correct ID, and I will switch the icon from black to red. Yeah, so that's how you can call JavaScript functions from the .vvm code behind. You have to use static command. If you use just classic command, it wouldn't work because the commands are invoked on the server, but this is a client-side thing, so you need to use static command. Okay, so that's the JS module. If you want to use TypeScript instead of just pure JavaScript, because this is just pure JavaScript, this export and class keywords, there are new in ECMAScript 2015, which is pretty old, but until recently, not all browsers could support this API, but right now, today, when almost all browsers are using the Chromium rendering engine, so you can quite safely use these features. And we also have a version which is using a module bundler called Rollup, and it's great because it can join the scripts together with their dependencies. So I have the dashboard module, and it's written in TypeScript, so the extension is TS. And I'm just importing the library Microsoft Signal R, and it will get bundled together. So I won't be loading the Signal R JS and then the Google API JS and then my module, but it will be bundled together in one file. And the rest is pretty much the same. TypeScript adds some nice syntax sugar, so you have IntelliSense on some things and so on. But in principle, this is basically the same as in JavaScript. And I have this package JSON which configures the rollup bundler, and basically there is the rollup config which tells, okay, take this TypeScript file, and here is how it should be processed. So it's TypeScript compiled, resolve dependencies from CommonJS, and minify the file. So the result is then this file. This is the generated JavaScript, and you can see it starts with Signal R code base, and then at the end there will be my own class. Yeah, this is my code. Yeah, so you can also bundle these things together, which may be very practical in some scenarios. Okay, so that's JS modules, JS directive. There is other thing I have already mentioned. There is a new API for interaction with the view model. So basically, if you want to read the view model from JavaScript, you can just say .vvm.state, and it will return a snapshot of the view model. And you cannot modify this object by just calling .vvm.state, because the object is frozen. It's a feature of JavaScript that it can freeze objects, so no one is able to manipulate with the properties of the object. So you will get an object which is basically frozen. I can show it here in the JavaScript console. So let's clear the console, and I call .vvm.state. Yeah, so you can see I'm getting the view model, and it's a clean view model without the knockout observables which were in the previous versions. So this is just pure JavaScript object. And I can, for example, try to set things, state chat message equals blah, blah, blah. So you can see that if I will read it, it's still unset. Yeah, so you can assign things to the object, but nothing will happen because the object is frozen. If you want to manipulate with the view model, you need to use the patch state function, and you need to say chat message will equal this. And now if I call .vvm.state chat message, you can see now the value is set. Yeah, so the view model is basically immutable, and you need to use a patch state function to do modifications to the view model. Yeah. So also there is still the old way of interacting with view model. If you have been doing this in older versions of .vvm, there was .vvm view models root view model, and it's knockout observable. So when I just evaluate the chat message, you can see it returns some crazy object. And if I evaluate it as a function, you can see the value, and you can set values. So changing value is that you call the observable and pass the value as a parameter. Yeah. And there is another new thing in .vvm. So this is the old API which still works and is synchronized with the native .vvm state, but it also does quite nice things because it can check types. So if I try to set an object to a string property, so it shouldn't work. So I will get an error that object cannot be set to a string property. And this behavior is new in .vvm 3.0 because before we didn't check types. .vvm would just allow you to store object in the string property, which could do a very crazy thing. So now from .vvm 3.0, this is safe to do, and .vvm will tell you if there is any issue with this, because it checks the types for you. And the knockout observables are still there, so you can use them as before, but they will, if you try to do something incorrect, you will get an exception. If you send there some object or some value which isn't exactly string but can be converted to string, like for example number. Yeah. So okay, I'm missing some scripts. So now it can't do this change, but let's try something else. Maybe true. Yeah, so you can see that true would work, and .vvm would convert it to this value. The problem here is that by default, .vvm doesn't include the globalize script, which can convert numbers to strings. So you shouldn't rely on these automatic conversions because, as you just saw, they can fail in some cases. But .vvm will try to convert the value if the conversion is not very difficult. Yeah, so we have already seen this. The other thing you can use is lambda expressions in the data bindings. And it has been also used here in the named command, because if you need to call something from JavaScript and pass parameters, you need to use lambdas for that. But there is other usage of lambdas. You can use some methods from the LINQ. So for example, the where method. It's nice because you can do client-side filtering and sorting and things like that. And right now, in .vvm 3.0, we support only where and select. So it's kind of limited, but we have already implemented plenty of other functions. But it's okay. I need to. Okay, now I can click links. Yeah, so we have already implemented and merged this pull request, which adds a lot of other LINQ methods. So all, any, concat, first or default, min, max, order by, skip, take, and a lot of the others. And also some other methods on strings, because it's nice that you can use where to do client-side filtering. But if string contains is not supported, there's not a lot of things you can actually do. So we have also added these functions and also some math functions, because they were easy to add. And I think that for rounding numbers or things like that, or max min, it can also be quite useful. So, and that's already done. So you will see this in .vvm 3.1 sometime next month. Okay, there are some other improvements in .vvm 3.0. We have completely rewritten the code base in the TypeScript, so the client-side part of .vvm, to modern TypeScript. So we are using the latest TypeScript features. We are using rollup for bundling because we are building two separate versions, one for IE 11, which needs some polyfills to fill the gaps in the missing APIs. And we are emitting a new version for the modern browsers. Together, .vvm with Knockout.js has something about 100 kilobytes. So it's very tiny in comparison to Blazor or other framework, or even React, Angular. These are much bigger. And if the HTTP compression is enabled, it's about 50 kilobytes of JavaScript. So it's really tiny. So it can be really efficient even if the users don't have a good mobile connection or something like that. We have been also refactoring the postback pipelines. We have fixed a lot of bugs and a lot of race conditions that were there, and we have added some new events to .vvm events in the JavaScript. So if I just see .vvm events, there are some new events which you can use. For example, we have the new init completed, which is called once the page is loaded and viewmodel is initialized and everything is ready for you to use. And there are some other events which you can hook on and do a lot of things in these events. So if you want to try .vvm 3.0, it's already released. You can find it on NuGet. You can just upgrade your projects to .vvm 3.0, but make sure to test the application to visit all the pages because there might be some tiny breaking changes. We are doing our best to avoid them, but since we have rewritten a lot of code in .vvm, of course, it's extremely difficult to catch all the edge cases that you might have in your applications. If you are using .vvm Business Pack, the final version of 3.0 is not ready yet, but there is preview number 3, which is public, and it's compatible and tested together with .vvm 3.0. So everything should work in this release, and we will be releasing the final version very soon. And I have updated the JS directive sample, so you don't need to check out the view module, the submodules in Git. You can just run the project, and it will work. Okay, so what's the plan for .vvm 3.1? I have already told you that it will be released sometime next month because we have a lot of work has already been done. So the significant feature is that we will support type inference in lambdas. In 3.0, you need to specify the type of this parameter. .vvm cannot infer it automatically, but in 3.1, this syntax will be permitted. So you won't need to say customer C. You can just say the C and the arrow and the code. So that's that will make using lambdas much easier. Of course, in some cases, you will still need to explicitly set the type like here, because here there is nothing from which .vvm could infer that the I is integer. But if you will be calling something .where and passing lambda as a parameter to the function, then it can be inferred. So in some cases, you will still need to write this type here, but in many cases, .vvm will figure out the type itself. And so we will be able to translate more LINQ methods, as I shown the pull request, which is already merged, so it will be out very soon. And we have also implemented the string interpolation. It's the syntax with the $sign before the string, where you can substitute values in the binding. So you will be able to use this feature of the C# language in the data binding expressions. And we also fixed the file upload component, and it doesn't need iframe anymore. It was there because of the old browsers like Internet Explorer 9, which we don't support anymore. So the only version of IE we still support is IE 11. And in IE 11, we don't need to use iframe for uploading files. And also in the modern browsers, there is no need to use iframe. So the file upload component will be more efficient, and it won't need the iframe to be able to upload the files on the background. So this, and there it should work the same way, but just the component is simpler and doesn't render so much crap as it was doing before. So here's the list of pull requests that are going to version 3.1, and you can see most of them is already merged. There are only 3 open pull requests to 3.1, and 8 of them is closed. So it means that like in 75 or 80% of work or something like that. Maybe there will be some other pull requests that are not created yet, but I think that this is a very good sign of that it's just it's coming very soon. There is also one thing that is not completed yet, and it's a bigger feature, but we are doing a review right now. And for DotVVM 4.0, we have a lot of nice and unfortunately complicated areas we would like to address. So I'm really not sure if we will be able to address all of them. I think that we will be able to do 1 or 2 large features until DotVVM 4.0, and then we will continue with the rest. But the main focus we have right now is to make writing your own components easier in DotVVM, because right now it's quite limited. You can write markup controls. Basically, it's a piece of the HTML markup which you extract into separate file, and it's great for components. If you want to reuse some parts of markup in your application, it's very nice. But these controls cannot do everything, and if you need them to be a little more universal, you will find out that it's not that easy. So a lot of developers was using controls that are written in C# code. We call them code-only controls, and this is quite complicated. The learning curve there is pretty steep. So we are finding some ways, or talking about some ways, how to make this easier. Basically, there are some general problems you may face if you, for example, want to define a control and pass some template inside the control, so the control can use it. Yeah? So you can use the same control on 20 different pages, but you want to change be able to change something inside the control, and it's possible, but you need to write quite a lot of code, and it's not very obvious. Also, if you want to pass some data bindings in components, also it's a little quite difficult. Or if you need to build the data binding expressions at the runtime from your C# code, it's possible. DotVVM is doing it quite often, but it's not very obvious of how to do it. So we are looking for some simple API that could help with this. So, for example, we already have a pull request that allows to build control hierarchies. So, for example, you will be able to define a composite control, which is basically composed from other existing controls. So it's not brand new, it's just a composition of few existing controls. And basically there will be a function which gets some parameters. From these, we will be able to infer the control properties, and you can use this value or binding type. So to indicate if it's just a hard-coded value or if it can accept some binding. And you will be able to just return a control tree, which represents the internal structure of the control. And of course, you can use ifs here and for loops and a lot of other things. So it can be pretty powerful. So we will be working on this because it might help you in many scenarios. Also, we want to get rid of the property declarations. So if you create your own control and you want to declare a property in it, you need to use the dot prop code snippet, which will produce this ugly piece of code with the get set and the property metadata declaration. And we were thinking about just using something like control property directive at the top of the markup control. So you will be able to define your properties in the markup file on 2 or 3 lines and just use them. So you wouldn't need the code behind class behind the markup control file at all. So it may also simplify some scenarios. Also, if you want to pass a template in your own control and then use the template somewhere inside, it's not very easy. But we were thinking about a control called template host, which would just be able to do something like, okay, here is the template, please render it. Yeah, so you will request a template from the control parameter. So the control will have the item template property, and you can just pass this template to this template host, and it will just emit the template. Yeah. And we also want to introduce some easier to use API for building binding expressions at the runtime. Because it's right now you need to compose the LINQ expressions, and it's pretty messy. Also, we are thinking about integration with other frameworks. For example, if you want to use some React components in your .vvm app, it can be pretty easy to do. In the history, we have already implemented a control called React Bridge, but it's not working with the latest .vvm because we didn't have time to upgrade it to the latest builds of .vvm yet. And also, it's still a little bit complicated to use, but since we now have the JS directive and JS modules, then it can be easier, because theoretically the module could just export a React component, and we would just be able to host the component in the page. And because now we have nice API to interact with the view model, it would be pretty easy just to read data from the view model in the React control. With React Bridge, it's difficult because you need to pass explicitly data from the view model and also synchronize changes. Yeah, so this would be very much easier for the control. And also, in recent years, a lot of investments has been made into web components, which is basically a way how you can, as a developer, you can implement your own components using your custom HTML elements. So basically, in the HTML code you send to the browser, you will use these elements, and they will be mapped to some JavaScript component. And it's a web standard. It's supported by most of the currently used browsers, and it's very easy because it's framework agnostic. You don't need to use React or Angular. You can use this in pure HTML page or in .vvm. And we are just thinking about how to make some kind of integrations for web components. So for example, if you want to hook on the on-click event, so you will be able to use this click event on a web component. Yeah, so that's where we would probably invest some of our effort and time. And also, since we will have the easier way to write controls, we would be also able to write wrappers over these custom elements. And it would be very easy because it's just building a tree of components, nothing else. Also, we want to do some improvements in static commands because they are pretty powerful. You can use them to just download some data from the server and patch the view model, not to just replace everything in the view model. And it solves a lot of performance problems. If you want your pages to be really fast, really performant, or if the view model is large and you don't want to transfer the entire view model to the server, then static command can help you, because you are not transferring the view model. You are just sending the parameters of the function, and you can use the return value of the function to just change something in the view model. But the static commands are missing some features. For example, if you want to use exception filters or validation in static commands, it's difficult to do. One of our colleagues has already proposed some features to the framework because he was struggling with these features in his app, and he only used static commands. He decided to not use the command binding anymore. So we want to make your life easier. If you prefer using static commands, then we want you to have the first class experience, same as if you were using the command binding. Also, we want to enhance the grid view dataset. If you are working with a large grid views and you want to use sorting and paging and stuff, then you will see that the grid view dataset is also more designed for command bindings, and you can theoretically load datasets using static commands, but it's quite annoying because you need to just send these parameters from the dataset to the server, and you will get a new dataset, so you need to replace the original dataset in the page. And also grid view and data pager, they render some buttons which are doing the commands. So if you want to use static commands, you need to customize the headers in the grid view, and you probably need to write your own pager. So that's what we want to address. So we have designed a new generic grid view data set which is extensible. So you can implement your own way of paging. So if you are using the standard paging, which has the page index and page size, it's the default choice. But for example, if you have a different kind of data source which cannot do paging by page index and page size, for example, some data sources or some APIs can just give you next page. Yeah, so you ask for the first page and it gives you 20 records and some kind of continuation token, and then you can send the token on the next request and you will get 20 other records, but you cannot go back or you cannot jump to the 7th page. You would need to go to the first, the second, and the subsequent pages until you get to the 7th page. So we want to support this kind of paging too. So this will be extensible. Or if you want to do sorting, but a single column is not enough, you want to sort by last name and then by first name, that's also quite difficult to do right now. But with this new grid view data sets, it should be pretty easy. And also we want to make extensible templates for grid view and data pager, so you can get rid of the default behavior. So if you enable sorting on grid view, by default, it wouldn't render links with command binding, but you will be able to tell, okay, I want static commands to be used. Yeah. And also we are thinking about creating some kind of a dataset loader component where you could specify your own binding that will be able to retrieve the data for the data set. Because one thing we could do thanks to this is, for example, infinite scrolling. Yeah, so you scroll on the page, and when you reach the end of the page, another data will be loaded automatically. Or virtualization, because if you want to render a table with 10,000 rows, it's basically very slow because there will be too many elements in the page. But the virtualization can make elements only for the piece of data that is visible. So that's also what we will be able to do thanks to this feature. And also C#9 brought some new features like records or nullable reference types. But if you try to use them in the view model, you will be hitting a lot of obstacles. So that's also a thing we want to focus on, because, for example, using records can be very convenient in .vvm if the framework gives you good support for these types. So this is also one of the things we want to do. What we have already implemented is a hot reload for .vvm, and it's a very nice feature. We don't have the NuGet packages published yet. They will be released very soon, but we are still waiting for it. But I have a demo for this feature. I have a very simple page right here, and I will put it on one half of the screen. Can make it larger so everyone is able to see it. And I can move my Visual Studio to the next part of the next side of the screen, and I have the hot reload package referenced here. So it's a project reference, but it will be just a NuGet package in the future. And basically, this page keeps a connection to the web server, and the web server is watching the files in the application folder. So whenever I change anything in my .dot.html file, and when I save the file, this page gets reloaded automatically. and the change is applied to the page. And even if I change some values in my view model, yeah, so this written something to the view model and change the markup, and yeah, so you can see the view model state stays unchanged. So you can just fill some form and you can continue working on the page. It will get reloaded, but you won't lose your changes. So it can really simplify your web development experience. Yeah? So you can do a lot of things like that. For example, if you are fan of text boxes, you can simply do this. And once I save it, now I have a lot of text boxes. Yeah, so, and because they are bound to the same value, they are synchronized. And when I get rid of them, you will still get the same values in the form. Yeah, so you won't lose the data because .vvm just stores the view model before it reloads the page, and then it restores the view model. Yeah, so it's a pretty nice feature which can really help. Of course, it works only for the dot HTML files. If I change something in the C# code, .vvm cannot do anything about it because just Visual Studio will need to recompile the entire application and restart it. So that's not very nice, but Microsoft is planning to do some improvements in this experience. So for example, if you change some code in a method in the class, or if you add some new code, it will just be able to replace the code inside of the running process. So they will be able to apply some changes in the C# code without restarting the entire application. So this will make the experience even faster, and DotVVM doesn't need to do anything about it because basically this will be the enhancement that will come with .NET, the next version of .NET. So that's very nice, and that can be a great experience for developers. So that's everything from me. I hope that it wasn't too fast, but I hope that I shared some interesting information. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me on the chat here in this meeting, or in the Gitter chat we have alongside our GitHub repo. So thanks for being with us, and I'm looking forward to Daniel's session, which should come next.
Thank you, Thomas. The session was really good about the features, and I'm also like really excited about the 3.1 and the 4.0. Just like a general announcement, like if any of the community member would like to try the business pack of .vm, they can reach out to us. I think we can accommodate few premium licenses.
Yeah,
And
sure.
if you have any questions, feel free. Yeah. And feel free to like ping here or on WhatsApp or wherever. Just feel free to let us know. And meanwhile, I will just share my screen. So our next session is from Daniel. So like our very own Daniel is a .vvm developer advocate, and he's like a very active, and he has been doing a lot of workshops all around the globe, and most of the workshops are happening virtually. So Daniel is also like an MVP, and also is like he's also like a very good friend of mine. So over to you, Daniel. Your presentation, please.
Hey, hi everyone. It's a whole pleasure to be able to greet you. So let me share my screen. Okay, thank you for the invitation, Abdul, and everyone for being here. Everything new in .vvm and everything that to come, it is amazing. In this sense, one of the things that we can take into account in this incredible framework are its controls. So in this case, in this small space, we will talk about a very interesting control of .vvm called repeater. So at .vvm, we can find approximately 25 built-in controls for multiple purposes. For example, to work with forms, perform validations, represent data, and among other things to work with in that. In this case, let's comment a little bit about the repeater control. A repeater is a control that allows you to set a preset HTML template to render items from a given listing. In other words, this control repeats a template for each item in a reference collection in the data source. To see this .vvm control in action, let's look at an example. Suppose we want a web page that displays a list of a series, and that each of the series displays contain an image, the name of the city, and the control to which it belongs. So in this case, for this purpose, we will need to have a list of elements, and in this case, a series as well. As is well known, .vvm is based in the model view model pattern. So in this case, let's take a look of each of these parts. So let me share this a little demo in Visual Studio with you to show the .vvm control example in this case. And I share my screen here. I suppose that you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yes,
Ah,
we can see your
awesome.
screen.
Thank you. So here in Visual Studio, we can find three parts. For example, in the model, we can see the city model, for example, with the attributes, for example, ID, name, photo link, and country in this case. And in the other hand, the views and the view models. In the view models, for example, in the default view model, we can define example of list of cities, as we can see in this section. For example, the ID, the name, the country, and in this case, for the demo purposes, the link of the photo of these parts. So this is the list, and we can, or we want to represent these items in HTML templates. So in the view section, in the default, for example, part, we can use this control, called repeater in this section, for example, and only we need to do is put the collection series, in this case, in the data source, and make the template in this part, for example, item template. And in this case, we can put HTML properties, for example, to put divs, for example, to represent, in this case, for example, the image of the city, and the details, for example, the value name and the country as well for each element of this collection. So, for example, in other scenarios, we can put, for example, a repeater inside of other repeater. So we can do that. In this case, I will run this project to see the results of this control. Only a second. Okay, it's loading. One second more. Okay. Finally, we can see this list of cities in this case, for example, with this template. For example, in this section, let me show you. This is the template. Here And for example, for each element of this list, we can find the cities. And this is that we can do with this awesome .vvm control repair. I find this very useful because we can represent data in an easy way, you know, only take account the collection of the cities in this case and represent these elements. So this is about this .vvm control in this special section of .vvm community meetup. I really hope that you like this little demo, and this is all in this case. Thank you. And there are more controls that you can consider, for example, in the .vvm documentation, and also in Dev2 and Medium blogs about .vvm. You can find this information about these controls and other real scenarios that you can consider to do the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. That was very fun. All right. So, like Thomas said at the beginning of the meetup, we are planning to have like a mini .vvm conference. So, if any one of the community members would like to have like a preference about the dates or about the sessions, feel free to reach out to us now or maybe later, whichever is the preferred way. So
Okay.
I think we are at the end of the session now. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Daniel, for presenting these features and the new feature and the releases and the like small presentation as well. And if anyone would like to basically try the .vvm business pack, please get in touch with me or Thomas or Daniel. I think we will be able to accommodate you a premium license for a few days. I think that's all from our side, and please feel free to join our WhatsApp group, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. We'll be announcing our next .vvm virtual meetup. Till then, bye bye. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Goodbye and
Thank
take
you.
care, everyone.
Hey, thank you. See you in the next meetup.
Thank you, guys.